Very good morning to you, all of you. And here today we have our dear friend Michael Kugelman from US, from Bitter Wilson. So needs no introduction from me. He's too well known in our part of the world and is a South Asia head there. Michael, welcome back to the channel again. And I'm really very happy to see you so close to me in Nepal right now. But what I wanted to talk to you about today is the new cabinet which is coming up, which is being named by Donald Trump. Some of the names have already been, talked about, and maybe I could have some of your perspective on those names. And let's start with the Secretary of State, for example, Marco Rubio. He has been named. I know he recently presented some kind of a bill, I guess, or something. Uh, Asking US not to have any kind of support to Pakistan, and then he also said that we should give all kind of waivers that are needed to be given to India, be it as 400 or whatever. So or the oil from Russia. How do you look at that name, and how do you look at it? Whether they can even be confirmed. I mean, if you have any doubts, you can talk about them. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Great to be back with you. And I think I would amplify that last point you just made that President-elect Trump has moved very quickly to pick a number of members of his cabinet. But indeed, most of these picks have to be confirmed by the U.S. Senate, including Rubio. In fact, the only one that we could assume is a done deal is the National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, who I know we'll talk about later. The NSA position does not need to be confirmed by the U.S. Senate, but the Secretary of
Mhm.
State and most of the other positions do need to be. So just to put that caveat out there, we're going to be talking about a lot of names. Most of them will
Mhm.
likely be confirmed, but who knows? But in terms of Rubio, I think he's safe. He likely will be confirmed. He's someone who has a lot of foreign policy experience. I think that he
Mhm.
actually makes a lot of sense as the pick for Secretary of State.
Mhm.
As a senator, he's the top member of his party on the Senate Intelligence Committee, and he also was a part of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. So he knows his stuff when it comes to foreign policy. What stands out about him, as you noted before, he is, well, first of all, he's a hawk on China. And this is a trend that we've seen with many of Trump's picks for the national security or foreign policy related positions. A hardliner, or not a hardliner, but a hawk on China. He also is a very strong proponent of partnership with India, and perhaps not surprising given those positions that he takes on India and China. He's a pretty harsh critic of Pakistan as well. But assuming he's confirmed by the Senate, which I imagine he likely will be, I think that one could look at him as a conventional pick, someone that one could expect to be very savvy, able to pull off that job, and very different, I should say, from the first pick that Trump had made for Secretary of State during his first term, Rex Tillerson, who, of course, was a corporate guy, the head of Exxon. This is someone who, Rubio is someone who really understands foreign policy, and I think will navigate the many, many foreign policy challenges that the U.S. will face with a fair degree of success.
Okay. And okay, then probably another name that has already been talked about is Secretary of Defense is Peter Hegseth. What about him? How do you look at him?
Yeah, I mean, this is very different. I said that it's a very different type of pick from Rubio, from Secretary of State. Rubio is
Mhm.
someone that has extensive amounts of foreign policy experience. It's not clear to me that this pick for Pentagon chief has significant levels of military experience, and there has been some criticism and concern raised by a number of observers about his qualifications for the job. As you know, he's essentially been a journalist working for Fox News. And as I had said before, most of these picks need to be confirmed by the U.S. Senate. I do think that this one will face some tough questioning in his confirmation hearings. He may well still be confirmed, but I do think that he will face some tough questioning. It's hard for me to say what his views would be on issues that would be of interest to your audience. The Indo-Pacific, India, China, Pakistan, just because he's been a journalist, and I haven't really heard him talk much or say that much about defense issues, about what he thinks U.S. Security cooperation should look like with the Indo-Pacific. I haven't really heard much about that. So there's a lot of questions about him. But when he has his confirmation hearings in due course, presumably we'll get a better sense as to what his views are.
Now, one thing that I really found very interesting about him was that, look, he'll be commanding. I mean, he'll be in a way commander in charge of the armed forces, and will be commanding some four-star generals. But I remember he has just been a captain in the
Yeah,
his experience.
indeed. Yeah, and I would say this, it is important that he does have military experience. I mean, that's an important thing to acknowledge. I mean, he's an Army vet, and he served in missions. He served in both Iraq and Afghanistan. So I'm
Yeah.
sure he has a lot of views about what's happened in Afghanistan, the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, which of course was something that Donald Trump initiated when he was president the first time. Anyway,
Mhm.
yeah, so he does have military experience, and some critics have said, "Oh, he was in the National Guard. That's it." But he is a combat veteran, Hegseth,
Mm.
and that's an important thing to acknowledge.
Correct. Yeah, my only issue was that would there be an issue of the experience, not only in terms of people who have already served in the higher spaces, high places in military, but here comes somebody who has just been a captain, which is not a very high
Yeah,
post, and there he
indeed.
comes, and then you command them. So it kinds of little anyway. And another name that is of my probably my would be the Secretary of Homeland Scrutiny, was Christy Noem. That's yeah, Christy Noem. Yeah, that's she too. She's already named. Would you like to talk about her, from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, again, this is what I would describe as somewhat of a more unconventional pick. I mean, she's someone who served as a governor previously in South Dakota, and
Mm.
she served several terms in Congress in the House of
Mm-hmm.
Representatives. Has always been a big backer of
Mm-hmm.
Trump, which is generally the case with most of these people that he's picked so far, with a few exceptions, some very
Mm-hmm.
interesting exceptions, like
Mm-hmm.
Rubio, who had sparred a lot with Trump when they were
Mm-hmm.
both presidential candidates at one point. Anyway, you know, like a number of these picks, I mean, there is some controversy that's attached to her. As I recall, there had been some claims that she had made that she had met the North Korean leader Kim Jong Un, but apparently that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but again, this is sort of an unknown territory. It's sort of hard to know what her positions would be in this role. But I think here we have to look at a case of someone who has long been a strong backer of Trump, someone that aligns with Trump, I think, a lot in a number of ways in terms of views and so on. But I believe that there might have been some thoughts that she could be chosen as a vice presidential candidate for Trump. Obviously, that didn't happen. But again, I think with her, what stands out, this is someone who just is very supportive of Trump, and I think that the president elect is looking for cabinet members that he knows will be loyal to him, and so we'll see what happens with her.
Michael, there's one thing that I was noticing was that from the previous term, when Trump was president for the first time, and this time, one difference that I see is that he's appointing this time more of his loyalists than the people who are actually in terms of caliber, really, and the qualifications. It appears as if he's going more for the his loyalty than the qualifications. Would you agree to that?
Well, I think so. Yes, this is what a number of observers have been noting, and I think one could look at how things played out during his first presidency. There was a lot of turnover. There's a lot of cabinet secretaries that didn't last very long. A lot of
Mhm.
firings, a lot of hirings, and indeed, one could think that perhaps the president-elect would like to have more stability within his cabinet, but then again, given that President-elect Trump is a very unpredictable leader, and he changes course quite often, or he has in the past, I think that
Mhm.
even if someone is loyal to him, that doesn't necessarily mean that they would decide that they are no longer willing to serve under him if they find something that he's done to be completely against their views or whatnot. But indeed, the chances of him retaining folks are obviously increased if the view is that these are people that are particularly strong loyalists. And that I do think that is the case with most of these people he's picked so far, with a few exceptions for sure.
Okay. But then, given the relationship between Israel and US, how do you look at his appointment of ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee? How do you look at that?
Yeah, this is someone who has always been extremely pro-Israel, in the most fundamental sense, and combined with that, someone who has had extremely critical and indeed controversial views toward the Palestinian cause. So, we know that President-elect Trump is very close to Netanyahu, or should I say, they get along. I think they have a very strong chemistry. They have a lot of shared views.
Hmm.
And, as you know, the Biden administration's position vis-a-vis the Israel-Hamas war has been extremely controversial in the minds of many Muslim Americans. And there was a lot of talk about whether many Muslim Americans would actually vote against Biden and opt for Trump. Well, we see what's happened. It looks to me like the U.S. position on Israel is not going to change in a big way. And perhaps it could even go in the opposite direction of did when we had the Biden administration in power, where there could be even more strong ironclad support for the Israeli position. Now, Trump on the campaign trail said that that Israel needs to, quote, finish the job in its war, and it's unclear if he was, that could be taken ambiguous in many ways. It could be taken to mean that he thinks Israel should escalate and try to fight the war even more aggressively to try to win, or it could be taken to mean that he thinks that it's time to start negotiating an end to the war. Either
Hmm.
way, I think that the fact that he has nominated Huckabee as the ambassador to Israel suggests to me that you're going to have a very pro-Israel administration, maybe even more so. Maybe that support will even be more ironclad than it was with the Biden administration, which obviously would be very upsetting for many of those folks that were so unhappy with the Biden administration's policies in Israel and had threatened to not vote for that for Harris, I should say. Anyway, we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, I was actually, going through a statement. I don't know whether, because I haven't seen the video, but I read about it. That at one point during the campaign trail, Trump also said that Israel should first put the nuclear button on Iran and then talk about talk about the issue, which was like radical in a way. But you can expect that stuff like that from Trump.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, we know that Trump has been very willing to reach out to a number of U.S. enemies and dictators like the North Korean leader, and of
mm,
course, the conventional view is that he's has a bit of a soft corner for Vladimir Putin. But with Iran, yeah, he never has seemed willing to extend an olive branch. And none of these people that he's selected or that he's picked to serve in his cabinet seem like they would have any interest in reaching out to Iran, especially
mm.
what's been happening in the Middle East the last year plus.
But then, in that case, before we go to the next members, talk about it. How do you look at stuff that is going on between Israel and Iran, and vis-a-vis US? I mean, what is the role of US in these circumstances? Where do you think US policy is heading when it comes vis-a-vis Iran?
Well, it's interesting that for many years, successive U.S. administrations have said that they want to pivot or rebalance away from the Middle East and focus more on engagements with the Indo-Pacific. And I
Mhm,
think we've seen a lot of progress in that regard in over the last 8 years or so, both the
mhm.
first Trump administration and then Biden. But given what's been happening in the Middle East the last year plus, I think that it's hard to imagine the U.S. wanting to sort of move away and sort of overlook and sort of take an outside approach to all of these things playing out in that region. It's extremely dangerous and concerning and consequential for U.S. interests. So I think that with Israel and Iran, I think that the Trump administration will likely take a position similar to the Biden administration. As I said, perhaps even more of a hard line toward Iran and more of a friendly position toward Israel. And I think the view in Washington, and I think there's a fair amount of bipartisan support for this, is that much of the instability playing out across the Middle East is sponsored in part or in totality by Iran through the proxies that it has, the support that it provides to Hamas, to the Houthis, to Hezbollah, and so on. And I can't imagine that we would see any effort on the part of the Trump administration to try to, you know, extend an olive branch to Iran and try to use diplomacy to try to get it to change its positions. I think we're well past that. There's just too much hostility in the U.S.-Iran relationship, which has been entrenched since '79 and the events that happened that year.
Mm.
Um, but we know that Trump has said that he doesn't want to be involved in wars. He likes to be seen as the guy that ends wars. So that suggests to me that he and his administration wouldn't want to do anything that could risk expanding this instability and these conflicts in the Middle East even more. But if you take a really hardline position against Iran, there's a risk that you could have more movements up the escalation ladder, which could risk further instability. And I don't think that this Trump administration would have an interest in that. There's going to be tremendous levels of support for Israel and everything that it does, but I don't think that Trump and his cabinet would want to see escalating instability. I do think that this administration will want to focus more on the Indo-Pacific. We haven't talked about Waltz yet, but the pick for NSA, and he will be NSA because he doesn't have to be confirmed. He wrote a piece in The Economist just a few weeks ago, a co-authored piece, where he calls that it's finally time to complete this pivot to the Indo-Pacific, so to speak. So I think that this administration would have a strong interest in seeing things calm down in the Middle East, but it's hard to imagine that happening anytime soon.
Yeah, but let's talk about, because you started already talking about it. Why don't we talk about Waltz further? I mean, at his appointment and what could be developing. What are his views on the Asia Pacific or Indo Pacific, as well as on the region? What impact it could have?
Yeah, I mean, Waltz is someone that has significant levels of experience when it comes to security policy, foreign policy. He's got a very stellar, prestigious military record. He's extremely conservative, which is, of course, why he's been so appealing to President-elect Trump. But this is someone like Hegseth who served combat tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. Or he was in Afghanistan. I believe he was in Iraq as well.
Mhm.
He's a Green Beret vet, and that's very prestigious.
Mhm.
In terms of his policies in the region, he's a China hawk. He's a part of the China Task Force in the House of Representatives, which is meant to focus on how to address the communist or the influence of the CCP. And the interesting thing about Waltz is that he's taken a bit of a sort of a skeptical position, one could say, about the idea of expanding aid to Ukraine in its war against Russia. That's interesting. That might put him at odds with Rubio. It wouldn't necessarily put him at odds with Trump. But Waltz is a very strong proponent of partnership with India. He's been very critical of Pakistan at times when it comes up. But Pakistan is not an issue that he's brought up that much. So I think that he, like Rubio, is good for India, good for the U.S.-India relationship, good for U.S.-India security cooperation. And as I said, I mean, he's a big proponent of really focusing more on the Indo-Pacific. So one could assume that he is a big proponent of the Indo-Pacific strategy. He'll want to ramp that up. He'll want to focus on looking at how security cooperation with India can be ramped up in ways that take place outside of the alliance system. So, I think that this all comes up roses. The NSA pick. This will be good for the U.S.-India relationship. Particularly at a moment when we've seen security cooperation and military-to-military cooperation between the U.S. and India pick up in a big way, especially because we've seen these foundational defense accords concluded in recent years, and the Trump administration concluded several of them. So yeah, I mean, no intrigue here. I mean, no controversy here in terms of what he could mean for U.S.-India security relations. I think it should all be very, very positive.
Michael, it's not just about India. I think we should not forget the Pakistani angle. And I am aware IMF delegation was there till yesterday. I think last evening they have left. If not, I think last evening they have left. It has come much before time, 3 months before time. They were supposed to come in March. They have landed up there in November itself. So there are issues with the economy right now in Pakistan. So that is one part. And if we are getting such people in administration, US administration, that are actually in a way anti-Pakistan, if we put it, I'm just saying it mildly, the way things are appearing. So I'm little at times I find it little disturbing as to which way are we supposed to look at Pakistan, because things are not looking rosy for them, because these people are all partnership with India is all fine. I'm being myself in India, I feel good about it, but at the same time I also believe that that I don't want any fire in my neighborhood, because you are not far away from the heat if there is fire in your neighborhood. So
Right.
I mean, let's be practical about it. This is how things work, but how do you look at it, the scenario in Pakistan? I mean, which way is it headed, or which way could we look at it? Could the situation develop? Because political instability, political instability is very much there. There's not stable as of now. So how do we look at it? I mean, because the region cannot be stable if there is disturbance in these part of the region.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And if you look at the U.S. approach to Pakistan over the last few years, both the first Trump administration and the Biden administration, is fairly similar. Is this idea of having a workable relationship with Pakistan, but much more scaled back than it was when the U.S. was in Afghanistan. And it does raise some interesting questions about now. I mean, you have some notably strong proponents of India and folks that have been critical of Pakistan. What could that mean for U.S.-Pakistan relations moving forward? Now, as you well know, there have been a number of Pakistanis that have held out hope that Trump and his administration will actually take a much harsher position against the Pakistani military, because of this view that Trump has been critical of what he describes as the deep state in the United States, suggesting that he would want to take on the deep state in Pakistan. I don't actually buy into that view that much, quite frankly. There's also many in Pakistan, mainly supporters of Imran Khan, that think that Trump will be willing to try to pressure the Pakistani military to bring relief to Imran Khan and even free him from jail. Quite frankly, I don't think that's true at
Same here.
all.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that we could. I mean, even in the last few years of the Biden administration, the relationship with Pakistan was really adrift. There really wasn't much going on. There had been, and
Yeah.
I think you and I have talked about this, U.S. officials, and it was the State Department that was driving the relationship. Had talked about wanting to have a more of an economic relationship with Pakistan, but the implication was that until Pakistan's economy gets in better shape, it's really difficult to move forward on that level. So, there had been some areas of collaboration and things like clean energy and public health and climate change cooperation. USAID continues to be a major supporter, to be a major provider of assistance in Pakistan, but there really wasn't much going on in a big way. There had been a counterterrorism dialogue. There had been some meetings, mainly about TTP and ISKP, but I'm not sure if this incoming administration would have any interest in focusing on those issues. I would mention the ISKP issue is interesting, right? Trump has often said, that he's the one that defeated ISIS, and he takes a lot of credit for that. We know that ISKP has become a major and increasingly global threat. It has a base in Afghanistan. Maybe this is something that Trump would want to talk to the Pakistani military and other officials about. Maybe he would have an interest in maintaining the CT dialogue to talk about ISKP, but I do not think that Trump would want to reverse his own policy, which he implemented early in his first term of, not having any security assistance to Pakistan. It was, of course, him who froze security aid to Pakistan a number of years ago. I don't think his administration will want to change that. So, short answer to your question is, I think we'll probably see much of the same, a workable relationship with Pakistan, but a scaled back one, but perhaps even more scaled back than we saw in the Biden administration. I just don't think that this administration will have much of an interest in working with Pakistan, especially with this very strong support for the Indo-Pacific strategy. Biden administration officials have been ambiguous about Pakistan's role in that strategy. It's awkward
Yeah.
because Pakistan has this close alliance with China. Given that you have a
Exactly.
lot of China hawks in this
Hmm.
incoming administration, assuming they're confirmed, I don't
Hmm.
think there'll be any interest in looking at Pakistan as a part of the Indo-Pacific strategy. So, yeah, I think it'll be a pretty low-key relationship with Pakistan.
But in that case, Michael, are we not then intentionally pushing Pakistan into China's lap?
Well, it already has a very strong relationship with China. The Pakistanis do, even with some of these recent tensions over Chinese security concerns, terrorism risks in Pakistan.
Yeah,
And I'll say this: the current Pakistani government, the military and civilian leadership, they really want to have They want to have a good relationship with the U.S. They really want U.S.
yeah,
They see the importance of the U.S. as a donor. And even if the signals from the Trump administration are that, we really don't want to have much to do with you, we want a friendly relationship, we don't much, I think that the Pakistanis would keep coming back and trying to push for something more. So I don't think the Pakistanis would want to risk completely torpedoing their relationship, or what's left of it, with the U.S. by throwing in their full lot with China. I think that Pakistan genuinely wants to figure out a way to balance their relations with both China and the U.S., even if we all know that the relationship with China is going to be a lot more is going to be a lot more substantive.
okay. All right. How would you look at the appointment of Tulsi Gabbard? Now, that's also again raising some eyebrows, I guess, in certain sections.
Yeah, and apologies. This is probably the last one I'll be able to discuss because I'll need to
Yeah,
go momentarily. But
yeah.
yeah, another interesting pick. Someone who is certainly unconventional because many observers have pointed to her significant absence of experience on intelligence policy, and this
Mhm,
is an especially important position. It's a very sensitive position. The coordinator
mhm,
of national intelligence. She's best known, I think, for serving as a congresswoman. She served in the
mhm,
House representing Hawaii, and she's had some changes in terms of party affiliation. She's been an independent. She's been a Democrat, and but she is now. Well, Trump has referred to her as a Republican. Yeah, what's controversial about her is that she has been associated with fairly sanguine views about Russia. And as I recall, she met with the Syrian leader Assad about 6 or 7 years ago. That was very controversial. So it's interesting that
mhm,
you have someone like Rubio, who's very strongly critical of dictators, but then you have her, who takes a
mhm.
very different position. And that presents an interesting question. Even though it looks like he's trying to pick loyalists to be in his cabinet, you've got this team of rivals, so to speak, or in some cases that have very different positions on policy. Could that lead to a situation where you could have a few members of the cabinet that just see something they don't like in terms of a view that they don't agree with, such as approaches to Russia or something like that? So yeah, this will be an interesting one. And I know in India there's a lot of interest in her because of her Hindu faith, and I believe Prime Minister Modi actually posted a tweet recently congratulating her for being picked for this role. So I know there'll be a lot of interest in India to see how things go with her. But this will indeed be a controversial one, and I think that there'll be a lot of questions as to how she plans to show that she has the capacity to pull off this very important, sensitive position, given what appears to be a lack of experience on intelligence policy.
Very true, very true, Michael. Thank you so much for this. But then, actually, the last point, this appointment that you're talking about, actually, it does raise multiple eyebrows, and for good reasons, I must say. There could have been areas where she could have probably performed better in terms of, but and this one, I mean, I'm not very sure because you do need experience to actually handle all these intelligences at FBI and CIA, and they have the objectives. Anyway, thank you so much for your perspective, sharing your perspective, Michael, and we'll keep in touch. I don't want to take you much of time. I know you have to leave, so but we'll keep in touch.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure to speak with you and look forward to the next time.
Thank you so much, Michael.